장학금 받고 독일 갑니다. 안녕하세요. 저희 독일로 떠나요. 여자 넷이서 연구하러요. 사실 저희 악명 높은 경영팀플에서 처음 만났어요. 근데 손발이 너무 잘 맞는 거예요. 그래서 산불 피해 동물들을 위한 크라우드 펀딩에 도전했고 결과는 성공. 이 일을 계기로 사회적 가치에 진심인 팀이 됐고요. 그러다 갑자기 들려온 소식. 연구 장학금이요. 이번엔 한반도 평화를 주제로 독일 탐방 연구를 기획했어요. 솔직히 이때까진 떨어질 줄 알았죠. 근데 1차 합격, 2차 프레젠테이션도 완료. 그리고 결과는 합격! 저희 장학금 받고 독일 갑니다. 앞으로 탐방 과정, 연구 이야기 재밌게 많이 올릴게요. 기대해 주세요.
예쁘다. 야, 여기 확실히 독일 같은데?
와, 여기 오니까 진짜 독일 오는 느낌.
진짜 예쁘다.
진짜로.
거리가 너무 예뻐요. 예술가의 도시. 진짜 걷기만 해도.
와, 완전 예쁘다.
그러니까. 킹칸.
되게 맛있대.
맛있겠다.
현장을 그대로 보존한 느낌이어서 너무 신기하고, 지금 보이시는 저 돌들 보이시죠?
네.
저것들 다 여기에 나왔던 잔해들이거든요. 근데 뭔가 그거를 다 보존하려고 노력을 한 게 보여서
네.
의미가 짙은 것 같아요. 근데 슬픈 거는
네.
이 장벽이
네.
허물어 두고서도 여기 저희가 지금 지나오면서 역사를 봤는데
네.
나치가 등장을 했잖아요.
네.
그래서 평화를 위해서 벽을 허물었는데 또 다른 세력이 형 세력이 등장했다는 게 좀 슬펐고, 근데도 지금 독일이 이렇게 뭔가 선진국이 되고 평화를 위한 다양성을 위한 나라가 됐다는 게 이 베를린 장벽이 역사가 뜻깊은 것 같습니다.
Berlin transform into an ecology city?
Maybe I need to clarify. I'm coming from Mexico City.
Oh, really?
I'm Mexican, so I'm coming from a big city,
Yeah.
and I can give you examples of things that I believe that coming from a metropolis, it works like here, but how it was transformed in that sense, I don't know, because I have been here for that long time, but I would say that the different opportunities or the opportunities that are available for the population, probably one of the things to have here. Germans will complain about the public transport, but for a Mexican, the public transport in general, you have enough public transport to move the population, although it needs improvement,
Yes.
but from my perspective, from my country, I think that the public transport is something important. You don't need a car in Berlin. Or at least I realize, so my feeling is you don't need it, you can ride a bike. It's not like Netherlands that they say it's like a paradise from bicycles, but here you can use a bike and that gives you this different feeling.
Yes, yes. If you've ever used public transportation in Seoul, you would know that Berlin has a long way to go. At least when it comes to the subway. I mean, buses in Korea are crazy, but
Yes.
subways are great. We also look more to myself. What I can say, I was born here in Berlin, so I lived here for a long time, except for when I studied abroad. But I think Berlin has lots of green spaces, and they try to save green spaces. Although we have a lot of need for constructions, for flats and everything, Berlin has many parks, has many green sites. We have the rivers, so that's spaces that are also needed to relax and to for people to have how do you phrase that, to stay sane. But I think Berlin in the last years it has become very trendy to work more on bicycle lanes and also like green roofings and like the whole green and blue city concept. But I think Marcel is much better equipped to answer that. But also, for example, very close by we have what is called Gendarmenmarkt. It's a very big plaza thing, and for many years it was basically just stones and concrete. And they have rebuilt it so that the water is actually being saved. So these kind of concepts are being put out through the city more and more to save water and to use that water to then, water plants to be more ecological. Because especially in the city center, it's a lot of concrete, and in summer especially that can be very uncomfortable. And also it's expensive. Our trees are dying in the streets, so they're looking for ways to conserve the green spaces that we have. But I'm sure Marcel has a much more eloquent answer.
Yes. Well, it's a large question of whether to transform it into an ecological city. Well, maybe one aspect is historical. As Isabel just said, the green spaces to keep people sane is something that Berlin as a city already recognized in the 1920s. Because in the 1920s, the city of Berlin purchased a very large amount of forest land, literally just green spaces in and around Berlin, which they purchased from private owners. But also in the 1920s, Berlin was still a very large industrial city. So you had all the issues in an earlier industrial population, like overcrowded housing, extremely long working hours, people hardly seeing the light, and so on. And so the only way to offer a little bit of recreation to the working population of Berlin were the forests and the green spaces and the lakes. And that is what this Berliner Dauerwaldvertrag meant, purchasing a lot of forest. Until today, Berlin is one of the cities with most forest being owned by the city itself. But that is an historic aspect. In general, environmental regulations and laws are, I would say, reasonably good in Germany, and so are in Berlin as well. But Berlin is also a creative city. So you have lots of people who have alternative ideas, progressive ideas, and that was already in the early 20th century, so that there were lots of people who thought about more natural lifestyles, healthier lifestyles, and so on. And I think that spirit carries over a little into our days. Like you have gardening projects, roof gardening projects. I'm collaborating with a colleague from an architecture school. We jointly give students a project that they design on green environments, and that is very, very popular. So people want it to be green and healthy. And of course, Berlin is, I must say, fortuitous. We have lots of lakes here, and as I mentioned, lots of forests. So you can actually go by boat around most of Berlin and really experience nature, like say half an hour from the core of Berlin. You can be on the water and see all sorts of wildlife. That is pretty rare for a reasonably large city.
What important lessons or advice can Germany's Greenbelt experience offer for shaping ecology policies for the Korean DMZ?
Phrase an unintended ecological area. Of course, it is very, very much unintended because the existence of the Green Belt grew out of the country being divided. After reunification, the decision was taken that this unintended creation of that zone was also, well, it could be a benefit. So it was protected. And there's, for example, a bicycle path, and you can ride all along it. It is preserved. It crosses through quite a lot of nature protected areas. And so if there is a lesson to be learned, I'm probably not the one to give advice, but I think it was good that in that moment, in the enthusiasm and in the joy of having reunification, that of course you want to tear down all the borders and you want to exterminate everything that reminds of this cruel situation. But in that case, luckily, I was involved in supervising a thesis and grading a PhD thesis a while ago by an ornithologist who worked on the Manchurian crane. What this researcher published was just an example of one iconic species, the Manchurian crane. For them, the DMZ is, of course, an open area, protected area. Nobody's going to go in and disturb them, where these birds can nest and rest and spend time safely. So I would assume that if it is possible to maintain at least parts of the DMZ as a nature reserve, one day when the reunification comes, which I of course firmly believe and hope and pray for, then it would be valuable to keep parts of it for the nature value. And I think also I'm quite interested in natural cultural heritage. It's part of our teaching, and part heritage sites are beautiful places for teaching on site, for experiencing it. And a place like the Green Belt or the DMZ one day can have both. It can play a role as a cultural memorial to history, but at the same time be a site of nature. Controversially discussed because one will want to erase that history, but at the same time, while it needs to be memorized, and keeping places for nature, like for the Manchurian crane, will help maybe turn it a little bit into something beautiful of value.
Thank you. Okay. And the next question is, how would you like to expand and further integrate your research in the future?
In my case, I'm more in the part of the education, more than the agroecology aspects in general. I'm more in the sense of how can we change the way that we teach and we learn. What I did as my research project was to identify the attitudes in young people towards environment, because education needs to adapt to the current circumstances. So we are a little bit behind in education, so it's how can we change it? How can we integrate it in a way that it's more connected to the world? Like, for example, with the business, I work with a concept that is called the handprint. It's a concept that actually says that instead of talking about our negative impact to the world, is what kind of positive actions can you do? So it's more in the sense of when we talk about our relationship to the environment, is we need the environment. We are not able to take out of our daily lives, so how can our actions have a positive impact or a less impact into what we are doing with the work? So, for example, in the business, you already have companies that are analyzing how the process is done so they can reduce the impact for the environment, or how can we recycle, all these kind of things. So my idea is going in the direction of try to make education more relevant, to have the competencies, and to integrate the social aspects. So in some way try to do something for a better future.
I'm not a researcher. I'm doing administrative work, so I'm managing the project. I'm organizing the events. I'm connecting the researchers and teachers. So I'm the lady that organizes lots of things, but I'm not doing the research.
That is one of the reasons why we are in a project like ⮸삼이들. And then some projects, like, for example, profit greatly from international comparisons. So a lot of Wendy's data, you interrupt me, Wendy, if I'm saying something wrong, is gathered in Mexico, and then a comparison between the development of attitudes, say, in Mexico and Germany, gives a lot of insight on how global development might be. And so we have the hope to be able to gather data.
And I was really wondering, because we are all major business management, and do you believe sustainable development is truly possible? Because with economic growth, yes.
I think that every one of us need to believe that we could have a better future.
Yes.
And this is one framework that it's maybe not the best, but it's the framework that we will have. We have more people working toward the sustainable development in the sense of not only economical gain, it's more in the sense, can we grow economically, socially, culturally in a way that we can all live together? I think that that is the point that we need to reach. But you have this small amount of people in the world who are managing our economy. They are more in the sense of power and money, more in the sense of the humanity. And I think that what is going to be the change, that we are working like small ants together, is that we need to create the bigger way to say, you know what, we don't want to have that power. What is the point of having power when you don't have a humanity? So I think that for me that would be one. And education.
I mean, I really like Wendy's answer, and I also agree. I think it's a lot also about education and educated choices. If you're really interested in that, we are in our summer schools. We also usually have a part which is called environmental psychology, which looks exactly into that, like how can people shift their behavior and why do they, and what are the drivers behind that, what are the motivation, and also the interplay of like what the individual person needs to change or wants to change and can change, and also what needs to happen on an institutional and policy level. And then, although I like your answer, maybe also a bit more of a brutalist, realist aspect to it is that I also think you can tell that both governments and businesses realize that environmental protection is also a business in a certain sense. I mean, there's lots of greenwashing happening, but also you understand that environmental protection can be a market too. Like if you find tools to minimize emissions, if you find ways of making processes more efficient, and in that way save resources, you can have a bigger profit. If you can, if you can show that you're more of a green player, you might be more popular among the public. Like there are certain extents that is also for business minds instead. That you can understand that environmental protection can also help your business.
I can understand what you say, because it's like we focus on what is more valuable. Yes. Because even if happiness and environment is not, we can't price, but it is much more worse than money. You're right. Yes.
I think that the other point is that we need to stop pointing with the finger.
Yeah.
You realize that, for example, I'm not able to go and say to someone who is working in the fields in Mexico that you are using fertilizers, so you are doing something wrong. because for them it's the way of surviving.
Yes.
It's understand that, okay, in the moment when we create the fertilizers was because we wanted to grow more food. You eat meat, yes, I eat meat, but you know, I can do it in a different way. I can try to search sustainable options. I don't have to eat 7 days. I can do it one time and then, you know, going in a... I think that is the point when what happened, for example, with students and people is that you are always saying or making people feel bad. You are doing something bad. Whatever you're doing something bad.
Yes.
So what will be the result? Well, if it's something bad, okay, so I'm not able to do anything else. So you are, you know, killing the agency from people to actually think about, reflect and say, well, I can make this small change.
Yes. Oh, I think that's very essential point because the same situation happens in Korea too. That because different perspective people blame each other. So yes, that's really important. Okay.
유미님, 저희가 플로깅을 하는 이유가 뭐죠?
저희는 생태와 그리고 독일의 그린벨트에 대해서 연구를 하고 있는데요. 사실 이런 그린벨트라고 하지만 실제로 저희가 관광지를 다니면서 느낀 점이 쓰레기가 만연하게 많다는 점이었어요. 특히 베를린에 더 많다는
네.
점. 그래서 저희가 이걸 시작하게 됐죠, 유미님?